That's right, folks. The 90s are here again. They're handing out free Pokemon cards to screenings of this movie. But unlike Pokemon 2000, where everybody got the same, though very cool card that I lost, this time the cards are randomized, so you get one of two Detective Pikachu cards and one random other card from a Pokemon that was featured in the movie. Notice the holographic sheen. You can also get GX cards. That's very rare, though. I don't know anybody in the theater who got one. And yes, before you ask, people started trading these cards almost immediately. I heard, I was sitting right next to someone who was like, "Hey, will anyone trade me for a Psyduck? I got a Magikarp. Who wants a Magikarp for a Psyduck?" That was going on in the theater. I saw this film in a pretty big theater that was about a little past halfway full. It was Thursday night. And there were, maybe 50 or something people in the room. All of them were adults, either my age or older. There was not a single kid in that room, which I knew a lot of people my age would be seeing this because we're the ones who have been addicted to Pokemon since the 90s. But I was not expecting there to be zero children in there. And at least on with a Pixar film or a Disney film, on a Thursday night or a weekday night, you'd expect there to be at least a few kids there. Zero was the number in my theater, which is pretty crazy. And yes, there was at least one person in costume. She was in a Pikachu hoodie, before you ask. So this movie has been pretty hyped for a while. For those of you who are unaware, Hollywood greenlit a Pikachu movie, or a Pokemon movie, right after Pokemon Go came out and became an instant international sensation. So Hollywood decided, maybe around 20 years too late, hey, we should get on the Pokemon thing for the big screen. After Japan already has a long-running film series of Pokemon, and they're about to re-release the first movie again in terrible CG this time. I don't know what the motivation for that is, but anyway, so they decided on a property that hasn't been adapted into a show or movie yet, and that would be Detective Pikachu. Now, I'm going to say right now that I haven't played the Detective Pikachu game, though I do know people who have. So I have no idea how well this movie follows the story, but my guess is it takes some liberties, because while the first two acts of this movie are pretty straightforward, the third act is absolutely batshit insane. I'm not kidding, guys. This is a weird movie. It has kind of an off-the-wall kind of tone throughout, but the third act, it gets Cocoa Bananas crazy. And I'm not going to talk about it right away because I want to give people who are at all interested in seeing this movie a chance to experience the climax of this film firsthand, because I guarantee you, this film does not go where you think it's going to go when it starts. It's starts off pretty by the numbers, and by the end you're like, what the fuck am I watching right now? But I'll get to that in time. So let's start with the basics. What's this movie about? Well, pretty simple. There's this kid named Tim Goodman who lives a boring life, running a boring desk job, and has not involved his life much with Pokemon, even though Pokemon was something that he was passionate about as a small kid. It's something that he's kind of decided is not his thing as an adult. But he gets news that his estranged father, Harry Goodman, who was a cop in a city called Rhyme City, has recently been killed in a car crash. So Tim, his only living relative, goes to Rhyme City to collect his things and, mourn, I guess. While he's cleaning up his dad's apartment, though, he runs into a Pikachu in Deerstalker cap. This Pikachu is the title character, Detective Pikachu, though he's never called that in the movie. All the characters just call him Pikachu at all times, fair enough. And turns out this Pikachu can talk, used to work with his dad, and has amnesia. Now, Tim is the only one who can understand this particular Pikachu. He can't understand other Pokemon, just this one Pikachu. So Tim and Pikachu team up to find out what really happened to Tim's father, solve the mystery of what happened to Pikachu's memory, and unveil a conspiracy that will end up saving the city and possibly the world. So this is the first time that Pokemon has been portrayed in a serious attempt has been made to portray Pokemon in live action. Pokemon have appeared next to live action actors in commercials and such, and I seem to recall there being a sketch type thing it was based off the anime, but it was with live actors in costumes. I don't remember what it was for, but I remember seeing it on a TV at Six Flags. But this is the first time that they're actually making an earnest attempt to bring the world of Pokemon to the big screen. And honestly, the world building in this movie is fantastic. Like, it's the best thing in the film. I remember a couple years ago in my review for Spider-Man Homecoming. You don't remember that. But anyway, when I said that basically that movie was a really convincing portrayal of what it was like to live in a world populated by superheroes. Well, this film is the Pokemon version of that. The world in this movie is the world that I've wanted to live in since I was 6 years old. Almost every other shot, there's like some kind of Pokemon on screen, and you just see them living their lives and existing the way animals in real life exist. Like, it starts immediately. Like, we see like a flock of Pidgeot flying over the countryside, and we see like Joltik crawling up and down the electric wires in the Rhyme City. And Rhyme City itself is like full of Pokemon. Where Tim, on his way into the city, sees a very obvious exposition dumping video about how Rhyme City was built to be like this perfect harmony between humans and Pokemon. I don't know how that makes Rhyme City different from any other city in this franchise. It seems like they all have the cooperation with Pokemon thing going. Whatever. But they do seem to be true to their word, because there are Pokemon just hanging out everywhere in this city. You see a group of Charmander helping firemen put out a fire. You see Galurk hanging out in a construction site. Not sure if the Galurk is helping with the construction site, but it's certainly there. You see a Machamp directing traffic. You see a Octillery serving sushi. That's weird. There's even they even get Ditto in on the fun. There's one point where Tim visits like a news studio where they're filming a story, and like there's one character, Bill Nighy's character, what's his name? Howard Clifford, who's in a wheelchair, and once the shoot ends, a Ditto hanging out off stage transforms into a human PA and wheels him off stage. Like, it's constant. You're constantly seeing like practical applications for Pokemon in the real world, which was like pretty high on my wish list when I went to see this movie, of seeing Pokemon actually like interact with the real world in a logic that follows the real world while still keeping true to what the Pokemon themselves are. The effects in this movie are so-so. I mean, there are very few instances where you feel like the Pokemon are actually there. I actually watched closely for this, partly because I just saw Channel Awesome's review of Garfield, the movie, earlier today, and how they talk about, Garfield is completely CG in that movie, so there are times where, like, John or Lisa are carrying him, and, like, their hands are clearly, like, not quite in the right position. Like, they're very obviously like pantomiming where they think the cat is gonna be, and it's being CG'd later. I did watch out for that, and they do it a little better in this film, partly because they figured out in the animation for Pikachu to actually make the fur go over Tim's fingers a little bit, so when he's carrying him, like, it looks like his hand is submerged in the fur, which helps to hide the fact that the fur is, like, the hands are not quite in the right place. But I think they took, like, a gamble on this movie. Like, well, we had to decide what's more important, making the Pokemon look really convincingly realistic or making them keep true to their, like, cartoon design. And they leaned more in that direction, which I think, considering what Sonic ended up looking like, I think is for the best. Like, with Transformers, you feel like the things are really there, but they changed the design a bunch, and for Transformers it worked because these are robots. Pokemon are animals, so you can't change them too much without changing what they look like. So leaning more on the cartoony side and deciding to forego the realistic side is probably smarter. I feel like there is a way to like have them cartoony but still convince us that they're there. Like, I feel like Roger Rabbit did that something well. I don't know if you've seen the behind-the-scenes stuff for Roger Rabbit, but they worked really hard to make sure the actors were exactly positioned in the right place when they were interacting with their tunes, but I'm going off on a tangent. Even though the effects are not always up to par, like I said, the world building is great, and the movie finds, like, really cool applications for the Pokemon's powers that you wouldn't see in the anime, but make sense in a real-world kind of setting. There's one scene early on when Tim first meets Pikachu where he's set upon by an angry herd of Apom. like you are. And while the A-palm are chasing him, he's like running up the staircase of the building, and they're after him, and they're always like just a few inches behind because they're so fast and they're so good at climbing. There's one point where he gets away from them and he like shuts a gate, and their tails start like reaching through after him, and they start trying to grab him with the hand on the end of their tails, which is not only terrifying, but I don't think I've seen that particular use for an A-palm's tail in the show. I mean, it's possible that they did. There's a lot of episodes of that show I haven't seen, but, you know, that impressed me. There's also a sequence that I really love where they're interrogating a Mr. Mime. You've probably seen it in the trailer. And the Mr. Mime is not portrayed the same way as any Mr. Mime in the show. For one thing, the Mr. Mime does not talk, and it exclusively communicates through pantomime. And at first, like, it's like erecting like invisible walls so they can't talk to him, and being very closed off. So Tim actually has to use pantomime logic to actually get to this thing. He like mimes opening a door so he can get through the wall, and then he mimes pouring gas on the Mr. Mime, and then mimes lighting a match. I kind of wonder if maybe it's too dark, but since there's no fire or gas actually there, I guess it's okay, and it works. I especially love the way the scene ends, where Tim gets so excited about the information that Mr. Mime let slip that he opens his hand, which of course drops the match, and the scene ends right there. Like, it just shows Mr. Mime's panicked face, and then it cuts, and you never know, like, what happened after that, if anything, and I think that's really funny. You don't see much black comedy in Pokemon, but that's kind of the unique spin that Detective Pikachu brings to things. It would have been really weird, though, if the Mr. Mime just, like, shriveled up and turned black before their eyes, like, oh, Jesus. There's a scene, like, I'm going to talk a little bit more about Mr. Mime, because I find this portrayal really fascinating. For some reason, like, the padding on Mr. Mime's shoulders, like, if you're familiar with the design, you know, he's got, like, the red shoulders and the red circle on his tummy. The texture on there is, like, identical to what, like, a gymnasium, like, dodgeball would look like. Like, it's got, like, the red, like, grid pattern on it, like a dodgeball would have. I have no idea why. It's such a weird detail to add, but a detail like that I do find encouraging, because, it lets you know the designers are thinking really closely about this stuff. Like, I don't know, it's just weird and cool. There's also another scene later on in this sort of, like, underground fighting arena where, Pikachu is fighting a Charizard and is clearly outclassed. Like, this Charizard is going to turn into a little crispy nugget. So Tim distracts the Charizard by getting before it and, like, stamping on the flame at the end of its tail, which, of course, gets the Charizard's attention. Again, it looked kind of dark, because if you know your Pokemon lore, and you do have to know it in order to see this movie, then if the Charizard's tail flame goes out, the Charizard will die. So Tim just made an earnest attempt to kill a Charizard, but again, it's applying the logic of Pokemon to this realistic setting, and, like, actually thinking about the ramifications of their powers and their weird biology and stuff. That stuff's really cool. A lot of people have also cited Ryan Reynolds as Pikachu as a highlight. And yeah, he's pretty funny and really charismatic. Every time he's on scene, he's just a joy to watch and to listen to. He actually has a pretty good chemistry with his human co-star, Tim, who's played by Justice Smith. Tim is kind of a pretty standard character, but Justice plays him very well. Tim basically starts off the movie in a bad relationship with his dad. His childhood dreams have been dashed, and he's very closed off and doesn't like opening up to anyone. And over the course of the movie, he slowly opens up to Pikachu and forms a closer bond, and et cetera, et cetera. The story itself is where this movie sort of falls flat. And I know nobody was expecting anything spectacular, but I honestly think this movie would have benefited from a simpler plot. Not a simpler story, because the story itself is very simple. Tim basically has to learn to love again through his bond with Pikachu, and he comes to terms with he and his dad's past history of mutual neglect and blame. You see, Tim's mother actually died when Tim was a child, and Tim has lived in the custody of his grandmother, deciding not to live with his dad in Rhyme City because he feels that his dad is neglecting him by preferring his job over Tim. And he also this is kind of why Tim got disillusioned from Pokemon, even though the first time we see him in the movie, he's trying to catch a Cubone with his friend, so apparently he's not that disillusioned from Pokemon. Whatever. So, but the exact mystery that he goes on with Pikachu is, weird. And it's not the only thing that, contributes to the movie's weird tone, but it is one of the main things. So, okay. Here's the thing. You know how we see Mewtwo in the trailers and it was really cool? Mewtwo is like one of the first things we see in this movie. Like, before we meet Tim, we get a shot of Mewtwo busting out of the lab. And the moment I saw Mewtwo in that cell and he opens his eyes and says, "They're outside," which is what he said in the original anime before he broke out, I was like, oh, fuck yeah! I've known about this. I've lived with the memory as part of my consciousness of Mewtwo breaking out of the lab since I was a little girl. And now we're going to get to see it in live action. Oh my god, this is going to be so cool. So what Mewtwo does is he bursts out of his pod, flies through the ceiling, goes after the car, and flips the car. One car. That's it. And then we don't see Mewtwo again for a while. It's like, what? What? No! You go back in there and wreck the place! Fucking send shit through the walls, start a fire, go carry on their asses. I came for blood. I mean, Mewtwo is the inspiration for Lucy from Elfen Lied, who inspired 11 from Stranger Things. You go 11 from Stranger Things. Regardless, I feel like it was a missed opportunity. But anyway, they show pretty early on that Mewtwo is the one who caused the car crash, which I feel like they kind of should have waited to reveal, because the whole time when they're like, we need to find out what happened to your dad. It's like, we know it's Mewtwo. Like, why is the audience so far ahead of where the characters are? If Mewtwo had flipped the car in the beginning and everyone in the film was like, Mewtwo's on the loose, watch out for Mewtwo, then I feel like it would have worked. But since there's such a disconnect between what we know and what the characters know, especially since it was revealed later on, spoiler alert, pause it now, that Mewtwo is not actually the one responsible for Harry's disappearance, sorta. It's still it's like, I don't know. It's not the choice I would have made. But regardless, basically, the exact, okay, let me think. Okay, let me just say right now, the reason people are saying this story is simple, even though the plot makes very little sense to me, is that not only is it obvious what Tim and Pikachu's arcs are going to be, it's also pretty obvious who the villain was going to be. Like, Detective Pikachu makes an attempt to do the surprise villain thing that Disney's been doing, but it's such a piss-poor attempt that it feels like they're doing it begrudgingly. Like, remember that video I mentioned earlier that Tim sees when he comes in the city and it introduces the city? It introduces the founder, whose name, Howard Clifford, the guy in the wheelchair that I mentioned. So, here's what you know about him based on my description. He founded the city. He's played by Bill Nye. He's in a wheelchair. Of course he's the fucking villain! And not only that, in this video, he goes on this rant about how he was searching the globe for a cure to his illness, and he found it with Pokemon, and Pokemon can help us to evolve to a new state of being. It's like, you are so the villain! He's like, he has said nothing criminal, nothing bad, but just the tone and the stuff he's saying and the Bill Nye, like, you're obviously the bad guy. Why are you pretending not to be the bad guy? And, like, there's a scene early on where he calls Tim to his office and tries to pretend that his son is actually the villain. It's like, no, it's obviously you. I don't even know why they're going through the motions. If you go back and watch, like, any of the anime Pokemon movies, their plots are always very simple. Very rarely do they hide who the villain is at the beginning. And the plot is usually just, you know, some guy wants to tap into the power of the Pokemon to make himself king shit of Dick Mountain. Like, that's what the majority of the plots are. We weren't really expecting anything more than that from Detective Pikachu, so I don't know why they're trying to add intrigue and twists and turns, and they're not great at it. So I'm gonna get into plot summary. Basically, Tim, while going through his dad's stuff, finds a vial that contains something called Serum R. And what Serum R is, it's basically steroids for Pokemon. Kinda. The Pokemon, it's a gas. The Pokemon inhale it, and it increases aggression and strength. This is what sets the angry herd of Apom after him. And when they go to the Pokemon underground fighting ring, they find that the trainers there are using the stuff on their own Pokemon to give them an edge, presumably. And so they eventually track the serum through all the twists and turns and find that the serum is actually extracted somehow, they're kind of vague on this, from Mewtwo in that lab. The same lab that Mewtwo breaks out from in at the beginning of the movie. So, okay, so the villain of this film, which is obviously Bill Nye, is mass-producing the serum and testing it on the underground fighters for what purpose? It is not the purpose that you think it is. This is weird. So basically, the movie gets weirdly twisty, and like I mentioned, twisty and turny. It kind of has the worst kind of twist, where one twist negates what the previous twist was. So basically, Pikachu convinces Tim early on that his father, Harry Goodman, who everybody thought died in a car wreck, is still alive because, look, I'm Pikachu. I'm his Pikachu. I was with him. I'm alive, so he must be alive too, right? And you're like, okay. But then Ken Watanabe shows them footage of the car crash, which looks pretty bad. Like an energy blast hits it from off screen, and the car flips off a bridge and says, nobody could survive that. Tim, your dad is definitely dead. Tim and Pikachu have a pretty touching heart-to-heart moment where Pikachu basically substitutes for Tim's father, saying that if, Harry were alive, he'd be very proud of you, and Tim confessing, like, I feel guilty for the way I treated my dad as a kid, and I wish I had another chance. It's, like, weirdly heavy stuff for a movie like this, but again, it's Pokemon. Pokemon has gotten weirdly heavy in the past, so we'll let it slide. There are a few times, though, where the Pokemon being in a scene are distracting. This is kind of going off on a tangent, but there's one scene early on where Tim talks to Ken Watanabe, who plays another cop in his dad's office, and like he and Ken are trying to have a serious scene where Ken is, telling Tim like, your dad was really distant, but I know he loved you a lot. And meanwhile, Ken's like Snubble is just sitting in the back. It's just sitting there with its huge bulbous head and its angry face. It's like, it doesn't help that Snubble is one of the uglier looking Pokemon in this movie. Like, I know Snubble is supposed to have kind of like an ugly charm to it, but like, it does not look good in live action. It looks like it's ready to go for its shift at Freddy's Pizza Parlor or whatever it's called. It's like this thing. It kind of reminds me of a criticism Yahtzee Croshaw made about Batman. It wasn't a criticism, it was just something he found was funny, where like, Harvey Dent and Commissioner Gordon are trying to have a very serious, dramatic conversation. All of a sudden, Batman swings in with his cape, and it was like that, but worse. But anyway, basically, twist, Tim's father's alive. Next twist, he's not alive. Sorry, Tim. Twist after that, he actually is alive. And there's like a few times when they do stuff like that. When they finally do encounter Mewtwo, shows Pikachu and Tim a memory of Pikachu helping Mewtwo escape. So Pikachu now thinks he's the bad guy, and it's like, and that's what moves them into Beat 7, where Tim and Pikachu go separate ways because Pikachu thinks he's gonna hurt Tim now because he's one of the bad guys. It's like, why are we doing this? Why are we doing any of this? I don't understand. There is one neat bit of foreshadowing, I think, where when Tim first goes into Howard Clifford's office, Bill Nye, there's like 3 big statues of like the deities from 4th gen. There's like Dialga, Palkia, and Arceus. The statue of Arceus is right above Howard Clifford's chair. So like the god is like looming over his chair. That's I thought it was really cool foreshadowing. Again, it's not something that anyone outside this fan base is going to get, but I'm not sure how many people outside this fan base are going to see this movie. First of all, I'm not sure how many people outside this fan base even exist anymore. But, that's a reference that only fans and kids, who are also fans, will get. But I think it was cool, and it was way more subtle than any of the, we shall evolve to a new state of being. Like, shut up. So, based on Howard's speeches about evolving to a new state of being, and ascension, and all that, you'd think that the plan would be something like, I don't know, he's tapping into the evolutionary power of Pokemon in order to make humans evolve the way Pokemon does so that we can take on stronger forms. That's not it. And I'm going to go into the batshit crazy third act now, so cover your ears, turn off the video if you don't want spoilers. But basically, here's the bad guy's evil plan. He's dying of a critical disease that doesn't enable him to walk. So what he wants to do is to transform transfer his body into a new, transfer his consciousness, into a new body, rather than downloading himself into a computer or maybe hunting down Xerneas to make him immortal or something sane like that. What he decides to do is to track down Mewtwo and upload his consciousness into Mewtwo's brain, essentially turning himself into Mewtwo. But he needs Serum R to do that. Remember, the serum that makes Pokemon act aggressively, because only when Pokemon's reason has been overturned by Serum R are they susceptible to being overwritten with brain power. So, near the climax of the film, he recaptures Mewtwo and does exactly that. He hits Mewtwo with a blast of Serum R, straps a neural transfer thingy to his head that looks rather silly, and puts himself in Mewtwo's head. And I have to say, Bill Nye as Mewtwo is way more awesome in conception than it is in execution, because when Mewtwo actually talks with Bill Nye's voice coming out of it, it looks really silly. Like, not silly in a good way, like Pikachu obsessing over coffee or thanking the bartender Ludicolo for his drink. Both things that happen in this movie, by the way. This is like the, oh god, kind of silly. But Bill Nye isn't done, because after that, he loads Pokemon-shaped balloons that are being held for the city's annual parade thing that they do, full of Serum R, and then unleashes, like, several metric tons of Serum R into the crowd, turning all their Pokemon, who, remember, do not live in Pokeballs because they don't believe in Pokeballs in Rhyme City, and subjecting them all to Serum R so that he can now use his new psychic powers as Mewtwo to put everyone's consciousness into Pokemon, the bodies of their own Pokemon. And he does this on, like, a citywide scale. Okay, there are a few questions I have. 1, why? 2, why? 3, why? Why are you doing that? I get why you want to turn yourself into Mewtwo. Mewtwo is the most powerful of all Pokemon. You could potentially live forever. You can fold entire continents into little nuts with your psychic powers. Why the fuck are you turning everyone in the city into Pokemon? They didn't sign up for this. He goes on this speech about how, like, Pokemon are the key to humanity ascending to a new state of being, and it's, like, really trying very hard to sell how evolution somehow ties into body surfing Pokemon. And there's, like, scenes where people are screaming and running from the gas attack, and then they wake up inside their own Pokemon's bodies. It's like, what is going on? What is this? Help me! I don't understand anything. But okay. So basically, Pikachu realizes that Howard must be the bad guy because he was lying about what caused the crash. Because it turns out what caused Harry's car crash was not Mewtwo, but a group of Greninja that belonged to Bill Nye. And that Harry and Pikachu were both working with Mewtwo because Bill Nye actually hired Harry Goodman to catch Mewtwo and bring him to the lab so they can begin this insane plan, the formation of the Serum R, the body surfing, all that stuff. That leads me to more questions. Why the fuck did they ask a cop to catch Mewtwo? I mean, never mind that a cop who has one Pikachu. A Pikachu is somehow a skilled enough trainer to catch Mewtwo. Why did they ask a cop to do this? Do they really think there would be no trouble, that he wouldn't try to investigate this at all? I mean, yeah, they're bribing him and lots of cops are corrupt, but suppose this cop isn't corrupt, like he ended up not being, and he ends up ruining your plan because his Pikachu gets away and meets up with his estranged son. Like, why did you go to a cop for this? Whatever. But anyway, Pikachu makes his way back to the city in time with a fight with Mewtwo, and what bothers me about this is, like the scene at the beginning where Mewtwo breaks out by smashing a few things, killing one scientist and flipping one car, which we later find out he didn't even do that. You think that entire city of human beings who now have the bodies and powers of Pokemon will be used in the climax somehow. Like, I don't know, maybe a bunch of humans are, like, trying to use their powers to help bring down Bill Nye as Mewtwo. But, no, most of the battle happens in the air with Pikachu and Mewtwo on top of the Pokemon balloons. So the human populace and the maternal Pokemon barely factor into the climax, which seems like a wasted opportunity. I'm not sure what you would do with that, but it seems negligent to not do anything with that. The plus side of this is since it is Mewtwo versus Pikachu on top of Pokemon balloons, that means you could totally recreate the climax of this movie in Super Smash Bros. Melee, which is the most important part of all of this. But there is one thing I want to talk about the climax that I do legitimately like. So, if you'll recall, earlier I said that Bill Nye tries to send Tim on this wild goose chase by making him think that his estranged son, whose first name I don't remember, Clifford Jr., is actually the bad guy. Trying to draw a very clumsy parallel between Tim and his own strained relationship with his own dad. There are a few times where Tim and his human friend Lucy, who I haven't talked about that much, but I do like, have spotted Clifford Jr., glaring at them menacingly through a pair of sunglasses and, like, wandering around. And, you know, in the background and just being very villain-looking. They're also... Bill Nye has a... like assistant secretary person who never talks. Her name is Miss Norman, and she definitely stands out in a crowd. She's got like pink gloves that only go down as far as her knuckles, and like pink hair and sunglasses, and she's very intimidating looking. She basically brings Tim into Bill Nye's office and then leaves. So basically, we see Howard, not Howard, sorry, getting all the names confused. Clifford Jr. hanging out in the crowd and being suspicious. But Tim, poking around in Bill Nye's office after Bill Nye, as Mewtwo, is going on a rampage, opens a closet door, and Clifford Jr. falls out bound and gagged. What? But we just saw him downstairs on the street. Who is that? And then, like, another Clifford Jr. walks in with sunglasses and then morphs into Miss Norman because the Clifford Jr. that we saw, the doppelganger, and Miss Norman are both the same being, and they are both the Ditto that we saw earlier in the newsroom. Yep. His human assistant, Miss Norman, and the evil version of his son were actually a Ditto the entire time. And there's like a shot where Miss Norman removes her sunglasses, and you see that she's got Ditto's like black beady eyes underneath her glasses. And everyone in the crowd I was went with, they went nuts. They were like, oh, no. Like, that's the best twist in the movie. That his human henchman is actually a Ditto. That was amazingly done. And there's like a really creative scene while Pikachu is fighting Bill Mewtwo outside. Tim is inside trying to fight a Ditto who is not only shape-shifting into his friend Lucy, who he has a crush on, and other humans, but it also can turn into other Pokemon. It turns into a Machamp and like, punches him, and it like dangles him out the window, and it turns into a Cubone and tries to hit his finger so he'll fall. Which means that, yes, in this movie, you do see a guy use a Pokemon to try and kill another guy. I'm also not sure why Tim is able to get up without coughing a bunch of blood after getting punched by a Machamp, but whatever. It's actually a really creative use of both Ditto and, like, a really cool thing for Tim to do during the climax, and I kind of wish we'd gotten to see more of that fucking Ditto in this movie, because that fucking Ditto is probably gonna haunt a lot of children's nightmares. With this fucking weird, like, Coraline black eyes. They do the thing like they do in some portrayals of Ditto. Not in the games, but in Mystery Dungeon or, like, the anime, where Ditto, like, no matter what Ditto turns into, it has the same eyes, which is why whenever it turned into a human, it was always somebody with sunglasses to cover up its freakish black button Coraline eyes that are, like, sunk into the face. Like, it doesn't look real, but it does look freaky. And, I kind of want that fucking Ditto. Like, there's a scene, Tim eventually defeats it by unleashing the Serum R on it, which overloads it and causes it to, like, morph and shift into a bunch of things as it's melting down, like Clayface and Batman. I'm like, oh my god, this thing. It's so scary. Okay, so eventually they beat Mewtwo. Tim is able to fight off the world's most terrifying Ditto to get to Bill Nye and rip off the neurotransmitter thingy, which gives Mewtwo back control of his own body. He fixes everybody. Bill Nye is arrested. I was sitting next to someone who wanted Tim to, like, smash in Bill Nye's head with a rock while he was helpless and human again, but he doesn't do that. They just arrest him. And by the way, Tim asks what Mewtwo has done with his father. And this is the point where this... I mentioned the Ditto being human was my favorite twist. This is the twist that I feel like is going to be super divisive. I feel like people are going to be like, oh wow, that was brilliant, I never saw that coming, or this is the stupid, craziest fucking thing I've ever heard in my life. It turns out that Pikachu, Ryan Reynolds' Pikachu, was actually Tim's dad the entire time. Yes! Tim's dad, Harry, was fatally injured in the car crash, so Mewtwo put his consciousness inside of Pikachu so that he could reunite with Tim and make right what once went wrong. What? So this whole time I wasn't hanging out with a cool talking Pikachu, it was just my dad, Ryan Reynolds? What? It's like, oh, it only transports matter, huh? I mean, it seems weird to feel disappointed that this isn't a cool talking Pikachu. It's just Ryan Reynolds. Like, just Ryan Reynolds? How spoiled are you? But I did kind of feel like that. Like, oh, I miss Pikachu now. Like, and yes, we do see Ryan Reynolds as a human at the end reuniting with his son. But, like, I liked you better when you were Pikachu. I honestly feel like the story would work better if Ryan Reynolds was just a Pikachu and Tim's dad was dead and they were able to bond over them mutually losing this guy. But again, I'm not criticizing the movie now, I'm just offering the choices that I would make instead. And that particular twist is why I feel like they're not following the game's plot all that closely, because I seriously doubt that was a twist in the game. Probably a friend will comment me and tell me like, no, actually, the kid in the game's dad really was a Pikachu the whole time. But yeah, I bet you didn't realize you were watching a Pokemon mystery dungeon movie the entire time. A human who's transformed into a Pokemon and in the process loses their memory. That is the plot of every Pokemon mystery dungeon game. And it's also the plot of Detective Pikachu. For some reason. And I heard like people like laughing jeeringly when that twist was revealed. The crowd I was with seemed to enjoy the movie for the most part. The crowd I was with actually seemed overly excited. Like, every time some kind of new live-action thing from Pokemon appeared on screen, I swear this entire crowd creamed their pants. Like, early on, the scene where Tim and his friend are trying to catch the Cubone, and his friend pulls out a Pokeball. And it's, like, a very solid Pokeball. Like, the Pokeball is one of the few things in this movie that really feels like it's there. I heard the crowd gasp, I'm like, oh, a Pokeball! It's real! Like, a lot of this movie is nerd porn. And I don't mean actual porn, because aside from a occasional off-color joke from Ryan Reynolds, there's like, there's nothing bad in it for kids. Not like Michael Bay directs Pokemon. Like, no, this is still mostly a very kid-friendly movie. When I say porn, I don't mean actually pornographic material. I mean fucking nerdgasm porn. Like, every time a Pokemon is on screen, or something like that, or they play music from the games occasionally, which is cool. The entire crowd I was with went, like, they just couldn't contain their admiration for it. It was really funny. You could actually, there are so many Pokemon in the background that there's a decent chance that your favorite Pokemon will show up somewhere in this movie. I'd like to do a poll of, like, did your favorite Pokemon show up in this movie? Mine did. As a lot of people know, well, not a lot of people, but some people, a few people, 2 people. My favorite Pokemon is Gengar. And we do see a Gengar in this movie very prominently. In that underground fighting arena, Tim and Pikachu, when they first walk in, they run into a Gengar battling a Blastoise. Gengar looks fucking scary in live action. But unlike the other fucking scary Pokemon in this movie, the Jigglypuff, the Snubbull, I'm actually okay with Gengar looking terrifying because it's a Gengar. Like, it's supposed to be scary. It's a damned soul wandering the earth who sucks the life energy out of people it likes so that they can join it into its eternal unlife of debauchery, you know? Like, it has, like, these weird human teeth, but unlike in Sonic the Hedgehog, who's supposed to be appealing, Gengar is supposed to be Gengar, so it works. Plus, Gengar wins the fight against Blastoise, which I'm very happy about. But yeah, there are so many Pokemon from, like, every generation. You're probably gonna see something that you like in this movie. And again, there are certain plot points, like the Arceus foreshadowing and things that you won't get unless you're a Pokemon fan. But this movie doesn't seem concerned with attracting anyone but Pokemon fans. It's like, it's solidly for kids and Pokemon fans. And those are the only people that it's trying to please. And I do have to admire the film for knowing exactly what its target audiences is and going straight for it. Unlike, you know, other movies that are based on anime where they try to make a movie that'll please everyone, but they end up, like, the quest to do that, they remove so many of the unique elements from it that it just comes out of a generic bland film that nobody likes. This film is like, no, we're Pokemon. We're going to be Pokemon. So, like, this film's plot is a mess. It makes no sense. And sometimes it's very goofy. There are many times where it's goofy because it's trying to be goofy, but there are times where it's not trying to be goofy and it is goofy. But one thing it's good at being at is being Pokemon. This is a Pokemon movie. It's not Hollywood pretending to be Pokemon like it was pretending to be Dragon Ball or pretending to be Ghost in the Shell or pretending to be Death Note. Like, no, this is Pokemon. And you do feel that. There are a lot of jokes that are clearly just there to be, like, fan wank material, but I'd say in a film like this, it actually, like, matches the tone to have stuff like that. And even though I don't like the plot of the film, I'm definitely not going to forget it. Like, this is a memorable experience, if nothing else, which is a definitely step up, not only from other American films based on Japanese properties, but other video game films in general. Before this film aired, we saw a trailer for, we didn't see a Sonic the Hedgehog trailer, which, like, maybe they pulled it after the backlash, but we did see a trailer for the Angry Birds 2 movie. Didn't know there was an Angry Birds 2 coming out, but just the contrast between that and this, really makes me appreciate this, even though it really could have used a rewrite, and all the good stuff was not in the plot. The good stuff was in the setting and the characters, and just the application of video game logic to the real world. So I do recommend this if you're a fan or you have kids. I can't really, in good faith, recommend this to anyone else. There are a bunch of scenes and jokes and little nods that I'd love to talk about, but this review is already pretty long, and I don't want to spoil every cool thing in the movie, so if you're already excited for this, chances are you'll be pleased by it. If this movie was made for you, then you already know who you are. Like, I don't think this is gonna sway anybody who's not already into Pokemon, but nothing never could. I remember growing up with Pokemon, and all the adults around me hated it. Like, my mother begged for death when she was in the theater to see Pokemon 2000 with me. My dad didn't get it. Nobody got this. Nobody really liked it except us. We're the people who grew up with it. We're the first people who liked it. Adults only came to like it once Pokemon Go came out, and even then, they weren't interested in the story. They were just interested in this fun new game on their phone. We're the Pokemon generation, and this movie is for us, and for the people who will follow us. So, that's Detective Pikachu. I did like it, though I was truly baffled at some moments. And I do think it is a definite step in the right direction for video game movies. I don't know what the next movie I review will be, but I promise you I will not make you wait as long as I did in between this and Bumblebee. So, this is Dragon Keeper 19600, signing off. Stay strong, everyone.